Today's daf is daf mem vav, and we learning in the Mishnah that we said that that even though some things there's no pigul, for example, kaimitz, if that's the last stage, it is its own matter. There's no pigul by it if you had the wrong thoughts or by dam, but nevertheless, if you ate the kaimitz beyond the time, if you know there's noiser and there's din of matuma. The only exception is blood. That the blood of an animal, not only there's no din of pigul because it's the last step, nor is there noiser by dam, and nor is there tumah by dam. You don't get curse. Says the Gemara, chutz from dam. And I mean, how do you know that? Why should the blood of the animal be any different than all the other parts of the animal? That if you're tumah, you chayiv curse. That if you ate the leftover beyond the time, you get no, you chayiv curse. Omrula, omakra. We're going to have three different sukkim. Ula says, we learn from a pasuk, it says, V'ani nosati v'lachem. I gave it to you, lachem, to be yours. Now, we're talking now about the din of mi'ila. Mi'ila is that something that belongs to the Eibishter, you're stealing. Until you bring it on the Mizbeach, you do whatever you have to do, then nasa mitzvahs, and then it's no longer stealing to use it for yourself. So Ula says, it says in the pasuk regarding blood, regarding mi'ila, V'ani nosati v'lachem, I gave it to you, shalachem. We're learning more psach in the second penny there. Whenever it says lachem, it means shalachem yehei. It should be yours. So therefore, the dam is yours. There's no mila by blood. How does it have to do with nicer and piguls, nicer and tumul? In a minute. Have another pasuk saying the same thing. It says that you should go in, and the Aaron Kohen should go in. And it says a pasuk in that same very pasuk. It says, "What I give you the blood for? I gave you to Mizbeach lechaper al nafshesechem, to do the kapara. The only thing that is mine is the fact that it's for kapara. V'lo mil, I never said that if you use it for yourself, you're stealing. Rabbi Yechon says, Makra. It says in that very same pasuk, Ki Adam who, all in the very same pasuk. It says the blood who remains the same. Lifnei kapara kalacha kapara. Normally, after you do the mitzvah, we say it's no longer stealing from the base for the Eibishter because you did whatever you had to do. Who means it's uniform throughout. So therefore, before you even sprinkle the blood, it has the same status as afterwards. There's no stealing. So we brought three different words from the same pasuk to teach you that there's no meila. So first we'll focus on Rabbi Yechon. Rabbi Yechon said, "Ma'acha kapara ein b'mila, af lifnei kapara ein b'mila." There's no meila after kapara, nor is it before. So the Gemara, maybe the other way around. Since everything else you get there's meila before you discharge the whatever the obligations are, say who come to tell you that this is the only exception. That even after you sprinkle the blood, it's still the Eibishter in your moil if you use the blood. How do you know which way to learn? Let's say lechumra. You're stealing. So the Gemara says, no, but we have a principle. Everything that once you did whatever you had to do, there's no longer stealing. So after you sprinkle the blood, definitely there's no longer stealing. And then we tell us who that it's always the same. So we have no breda, but to learn that before, even though we also have another rule that says that every time before you did the mitzvah, it is considered stealing. But there are exceptions. Egla rufa, it's only when you bring it down to the nachal eis, and there are exceptions that it's only when only when you did something, then the me'ila kicks in. So therefore, the other rule that after you did the mitzvah, for sure, there's no longer stealing. So when he says who, it's come to teach you that even before you did that activity, there's no stealing. So the Gemara, I'll give you an example. When answers there's no thing that you finish the job and you're still moich. Right? You take the ashes every morning and they will place it right next to Mizbeach on the eastern corner, and you're not allowed to use it anymore. It's sitting there. It's also bahana. You did the mitzvah, we're supposed to put it, put it down there in the first activity in the morning, and it's still also bahana. So the answer, you're right. So here we have an exception that something was done the mitzvah and yet it's still moil. Or but trumas adeshin ubig dekuna. The Kohen Gadol wore the special begodim on Yom Kippur. What do you do with those begodim after Yom Kippur? You have to put them away. Goinas, you can't use them anymore because you already did the mitzvah. It should be mutanah for everybody. No, it's also bahana. So we have two psukim that we have a rule. Whenever that two psukim highlighting the same thing that you did the mitzvah and still also means but everywhere else. It's mutter. This only makes sense that Rabban Adama we say according to the view that says that That what do you call it? The nicham sham means melamed shetun geniza. That what you have to do with it, you have to hide it, store it away. El Rabbi says a coin head you can use it as long as you use it for Yom Kippur, you can use it. So in other words, it is tak is mutar bahana. Rabbi said Amma mutar is the coin head you but vashlo shtamim Kippur achi shun Yom Kippur ma'ikol meimus. So all you have left now is only one pasuk where you did the mitzvah through Misadeshin and you're still over Me'ilah, but that's it. Says Gemara, no, there's another place. Should have a Tumas Hadeshin ve'egla harufa. You have Tumas Hadeshin, but you also have egla rufa. But egla rufa as well. After you did all the activity you have to do, you not have any enough from it. Also b'hana. Says the Gemara, which is Rabbi Yehuda. But the Gemara could have easily answered. Rabbi Yehuda holds that that by big day kohen gadol, it's geniza, so he has also two psukim. But anyway, so he'll have now three psukim. He'll have big day kohuna, he'll have trumas hadeshin, and he'll have egla rufa. But we're trying to accommodate everybody. So we answer, you know what? Trei miutik siva in these very two psukim of egla rufa, and in the psukim of egla rufa and big day kohen gadol, there's an extra miut there to tell you only over here it applies, nowhere else. For example, egla rufa, egla rufa. So egla rufa it says ha arufa. What's the extra hey? Arufa. It says only here this din will apply, nowhere else. But Hasim by Tumas Hadeshin it says, not by Tumas Hadeshin it says this some moy place it. Only it is still remains also, nothing else. So Gemara said, fine. Why do we need three psukim all in the same pasuk regarding blood? That there's no meila by blood. We need three psukim for. We had ula that says lachem. We had lechaper, and then we had who? All from the same pasuk to tell you the same thing, that by dam there's no milah. So Gemara says it must be three different dinim we learn out from here, which is in our Mishnah. So we answer. Number one is lamutim milah. There's no stealing by dam of the carbon, whether before or after. Number two is there's no noiser. If the dam was left over, you don't get chayv. You don't get no chiv of noiser. Number three is metumah. If you were tamei, then you don't get karas for eating the dam. What about pigel? The fourth thing, there's no pigel by dam as well. For that, let's tzadikra. We already learned the rule that only things that become pigel is if there's something else that's going to be mat to you, or you're being mat to something else. But if you are mat to yourself, no, there's the last stage. There's no pigel because we learn from shlamim. There's not kosher matidin ben pigel is pigel. But dam gufi matru, dam is its own mat. That's the last step. Rabbi Yechon said, Shloisha krisis b'shlamim. Talks about if you were tamei, you're not allowed to eat a carbon. One pasuk says you're not allowed to eat a carbon when you're tamei, and another pasuk says that you're not allowed to that a nefesh that eats from the boss of a shlamim. That's two, and then it says nefesh kisiga. If you touch a shlamim, which you said before, it doesn't mean touching. Meaning, what do you need three psukim by shlamim that if you are tamei, you'll get kares. Shloisha krisis b'shlamim lamali. Remember, you only get kares if you're tamei and the animal's tired. If the other way around, if the animal's tummy and your tired is allowed, but there's no cutters. Why need three psukim? So we answer achas leklal va'achas leprat. One of them, the first one, doesn't mention shlamim. It just says all kabbalas. If you touch any carbon, you know that you get cutters. So that's a klal. The next one says only. It says the next one is talking about specifically about shlamim, only about shlamim. It says v'hanefesh hashteichel. And so therefore, the first one is a klal, the second one is a prat. Now, we're not talking about a klal prat, the normal klal prat we have, because these klal prat are far away from each other. And we have a rule of a klal prat are far away from each other. It's not a klal prat. Okay, so it's not a klal prat as far away from each other. So what is it? This is another principle we had. Davar shahaya b'chlal. The yotzim in a klal, so it's not only coming teacher regarding itself, it's coming teacher regarding the whole union. It was already included in all the kabbalas. You shouldn't be tummy and eat carbon. Why does the Torah have to write a separate pasuk that if you're tummy you shouldn't eat, from the shlamim? Is to tell you that just like shlamim is kotche mizbeach, so too this din, if you're tummy and you eat it, you will get kodesh and only kotche mizbeach. What about kotche bedek abayis? Somebody donated something for the maintenance base of English. And you ate it while you were abehem, let's say, and you ate it while you're tummy, there's no kodesh involved. And how do you know that? From the prat. Coming teachers are generally only kachim mizbech. And what's the third one for? The achas, and the third one comes to be marbe. And this is the machlekes we had in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah and machlekes, the Rabbanan of Shimon. The Rabbanan say that if you ate a carbon things which are not normally eaten, and you ate it, if you're tummy, you're chayiv kodesh. And Rab Shimon said, no, you're not. Only things which are ro'ul achila. So the Rabbanon, how do they know to include things which are not ro'ul achila? From this third time, it says, if you're tamei, so we say that what? What do you call it? That even though it's not normal to be eaten, you're still chayiv if you were tamei, you get kares. Ula Rab Shimon, but Rab Shimon holds vodim she'ein necholin ain't chayovin aleim shetumah. He holds if it's not common to eat it, there's no takano tumah. What does he do with the third pasuk? Why does he say again? Lasui mai, lasui. No, it comes to teach you chatoyis haprimis. That also that if you were tamei and you ate from the chatos haprimis, you chayiv kares. Why would you think otherwise? Isn't it stricter? If a chatay is a chatzayna yechayiv, if you're tamei, surely in the chatzaprim yechayiv when you tamei. Why is it here? I mean, I would have thought. If you remember, Rab Shimon holds that the din of pigul is only if it's a replica of shlamim. What do we know about shlamim? That the blood is sprayed on the outer mizbech. So Rab Shimon says, when do you have the din of a pigul? It's limited only to kabbanis that you do on the outer mizbech. But if you have a carbon you do on the inner mizbech and you had these mind, all these pigul things, there's no pigul there. That's what Shimon holds. So we would have thought there's a separation between outer and inner. So maybe that this whole din that we're saying over here, all of this din that your tameh and your chayiv is only the tumah as well. Is only just like pigul only applies to the outer mizbech. Tumah, which talks about shlamim, is only to the outer mizbech. How do you know to include that if you were tameh and you ate the chatos haprimis, well, you shouldn't, but you did, that you chayiv kares? How do you know? Because you're tameh. Because of this extra ribbon. So my lasui chata pnimi. Salkan, I would have thought, oh, you want to shim kosher and mezbech shlamim. If you're not exactly like shlamim, ain't chayal no shapigul, no pigul. Maybe also you're not chayiv if you were tamei. At least you don't get kares. A lot of you do, but you don't get kares. Come on, shlam that you are. Numi Rab Shimon. Now this is fascinating. Rab Shimon said, mechayiv eshe darke lechol, only if you're darke lechol. What kind of word is numi? So Rashi says, previous page, that his Rebbe, we're not going to Snumi actually, in our mission it's not even there. Rashi said that his previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yaakov, said that that Meshulam bar Kloinimus was a goyim. The last things he said when he died was this Mishnah. And he said that Numi means said. And his girsa was Numi. You have to understand what the connection is, I don't know. But B'shas Misose. This is what he was saying while he died. In fact, I saw somewhere it says there were three things. He said three girsas of three different mishnahs. The last things he said came out of his mouth. And see, the last word that came out of his mouth was numi. Let's say. What exactly does it mean? I don't know. Must be a tifa vort over here. That b'shas misase numi Rab Shimon. Kamay Omar Rab Shimon. And he said that numi Rab Shimon means like Rab Shimon said. I'm not sure what it means. But that's the last words that came out of his mouth. So numi. So here it says, Numi Rab Shimon mechayish darke lechol. It what we learned. We have a machlekes between Rabbi Yechon the Shlakish and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yezim Chanina. Chad mahai zuzer or zuger v'chad mahai zuzer. One of each pair. In other words, Rabbi Yechon aligns himself with somebody, and the Shlakish aligns himself with somebody with somebody else. Rabbi Elazar, whatever it is, we don't know who's who, what's what, but this is the machlekes. Now, the first version is that they're talking about the shit of the Chachamim. The Chachamim say that even if it's not edible, you're chayiv for tumah. But there's two possibilities of tumah. Either the case where the carbon is tummy and you get a lav, or you're talking about the person's tummy, you get cutters. When we have a machlekes of Shimon and the Chachamim, which case of tumah they're arguing? Is the Chachamim saying that only if it's edible? Are they talking about only in the case where the person was tummy? Or they're talking about the case where the behemoth was tummy, and they're saying that only if it's edible, otherwise you're not chayiv. What are they talking about? So the Gemara says, Chadama, one of them says, Machlekes, the whole Machlekes is betumas basar only regarding the animal itself. The Chachamim say that if the animal is edible, fine. If not, not. No, but if you ate, for example, eitzim that were tummy, or you ate the lavoina, the frankincense, which is not edible, and they were tummy, then the Chachamim will hold that you'll get malchus. When do the Chachamim say you don't get malchus, it has to be edible? Only if it's talking about the animal. So, tumas basar. Aval betumas haguf. When it comes to tumas haguf, divrei hakol eino loika. Everyone holds that you don't get malchus. This is the first version. Everyone holds that when it comes to tumas haguf, you don't get malchus. Why does everyone hold you don't get malchus? Because in the pasuk where it talks about the animal, it says vehabasar. So therefore, because it's vehabasar, so the Chachamim say that even though it's not edible, remember, Rav Shimon says it has to be edible. According to Chachamim, say even if it's not edible, you'll get malchus because it says vehabasar. Coming doesn't say vibasar, vehab coming to include. Sometimes you say the hay comes to the limit, but here it comes to add. To add what? Even things which are not edible. The levina, the eitzim, the chacham hold. When it comes to the animal itself, if it was tamei, we're going to add them on. But when it comes to tumas aguf in that pasuk, it doesn't say anything at all. It doesn't say anything at all. V'habasa, so they're only edible things. Then and everyone agrees. There's no even the chacham will agree. If it's not edible, you don't get malchus. And once you've established that vehabasa includes also eitzim levayin according to Chachamim, that meat doesn't mean edible, even non-edible, says habasa. Then the next pasuk, which says here that a person is tamei and he's chayiv, continues on that even if it's not edible, if he's tamei and he ate it, he's chayiv kodesh. My time, once you already says vihabasa, which comes to include even non-edible items. So then the next pasuk where it says the next pasuk, and a person who eats that if it's tumase olav, if he's tamei, is a continuation. So even if it's non-edible, so that means that okay, that's first version. Rav Tavyumi Masnahachi. That version was learned by Rav Tavyumi. However, Rav Khan differently. He says, Aseifa. They're arguing not in the shit of the Chachamim. They're arguing the shit of Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon who said that you only chayiv if it is edible. When did Rav Shimon say you only chayiv if it is edible? Chadam machlek is only betum saguf. When is a machlekes by tumas haguf? Because in the pasuk there it talks about the carbon and the tumas love. So therefore, Rav Shimon says, hey, if it's not edible, it's not part of the carbon. Aval betumas basar, when it comes to the behemoth itself, everyone really like it because it says ve'habasar, that if the animal itself is tamei, it says ve'habasar sheyiga b'chol tamei. Any part of the animal, including parts that are not edible, including the not even parts of the animal, things that you use for the animal, the lavain for kabbanis or the eitzim. That's one view, and the Chadam almost says that no, Rav Shimon holds that even if the animal itself, your if it's not edible, you're not chayiv. It makes more sense the second version, and the way it says that Reb Shimon holds that you never chayiv for inedible products. By timer, even the loik, we'll go backwards in psukim. Even the loik when the pasuk talks about the person himself, which is more strict. The person himself is more strict because you get cutters. This is the only case you get cutters. Yet there's no extra limit to tell you non-edible items. It makes the karis. It's only the carbon itself. So therefore, when you go back in the previous passage where it says it talks about the animal itself was telling you get a lot. The pashas, it's the same thing. Like only edible products. But the Gemara, but we definitely learned v'habasa lerabas eitzim levayin. What do you mean? How can Shimon argue? It says clearly the word v'habasa comes to include levayin and eitzim. So he says, yeah, lepais lebalma, to say that it's possible, but nevertheless you're not chayiv. What do you call it? You're not chayiv kodesh, and you're not chayiv the malchus. You're not chayiv malchus. Says the Gemara. In other words, it's only midrabanan. It's not mahatayr at all. Even though v'habasa, it's a smachta b'alma. Only midrabanan. Mishnah. We already had this Mishnah previously, right in the beginning of the Masechta. L'shem shisha dvarim. When a person brings a carbon, you have to have 6 things in mind. First of all, hazevach. Zevach. Whenever you make a carbon, first of all, nizbach l'shem zevach. First thing is you got to make sure you have the right carbon in mind. That was the very first Mishnah. If you have the wrong carbon in mind, we said if you have the wrong carbon in mind, it's still kosher, but you're not yoyse except carbon chatas and carbon pesach. If you have the wrong carbon in mind, pesach bismanoi, it's possible. Okay, that means you have to bring it again. That's number one. Nizbach l'shem zevach. Next thing is l'shem zavech. You got to make sure you get the right person. Shini bailim, no good. L'shem Hashem. You have to have in mind you're doing it for the Eibishter. L'shem ishim. You have to have in mind you're doing it for a fire. What it means, the Gemara will explain what each one of these means. You have to mind you're doing it for the fire on top of the mizbech, and not what we'll see. L'shem reach. You have to have in mind that it should give off a beautiful, fragrant odor. And not what? We'll soon see. L'shem l'chayach. You want to give nachas to the Eibishter. Reich l'chayach Hashem. And b'hachatas v'asham, in addition, a carbon chatas and a carbon asham, l'shem chet. You have to have in mind what avera he is trying to atone. Rabbi Yosi said, af mi. So we start off saying you have to have in mind the right carbon. Rabbi Yossi says not only it doesn't, you should not have a mind. Sorry, Rabbi Yossi says you should not have a mind, no carbon. The best thing is the Chachamim prescribed have nothing in mind, because you have something in mind, you might have the wrong thing in mind. Have nothing in mind.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. You're doing it for a carbon, but don't have in mind any carbon.
Any of 6 things.
No, talking about the carbon. Don't have in mind any specific carbon. And why not? That even if you did not have in mind, no, you shechted a stam. Maybe also the Bible, shechted stam, it's all kosher. Why? Shehu Tanai Bezin. Bezin said, don't worry, you guys, shech stam, we'll take care of the rest. We'll have all the, whatever the carbon should be, that's what it's going to be. And why? Why would that Chacham make a takana you should not have in mind? Because the problem is as follows. According to Rabbi Yossi, the Bailim can have in mind with Haim Bismarck the right thing. It doesn't help. It's the trader of the Hamakif, the one who's physically bringing Makif the carbon. And what happens? He messes up. But if we tell you don't think anything, you just stand in a shech, then you can't mess up. And the Tanai Bezin takes over. Now this view of Rabbi Yossi that only the kohen Hamakif can make it pigul and all that, and not the owner, is a machlekes tanaim. But that's what Rabbi Yossi holds, that only the makif, and therefore it's safer. Have nothing in mind. So, for example, if the guy has in mind shaloi lishmoi, not for the wrong carbon, or l'shem bailim, it makes a mess. This whole pasuk of Isha Reich Hashem is written by an oila. So he says, Rabbi Yehuda says, oila. It says the pasuk oila is l'shem oila. You have to have the right carbon in mind. La'fuk l'shem shlamim. Don't have a shlamim in mind. The lie. You shouldn't. You have to have the right carbon in mind. Number one. Then it says ishim l'shem ishim. What do you mean ishim? La'fuke kavava. Kavava Rashi learns means. Don't just have a mind to char it. You should have a mind that should get burnt through and through. Others say kavava means kavava, straw. Don't have a mind, I'm going to put it in a straw, because you have to put it on the atzei hamaracha, which is the wood. No. Reyach l'shem rech, right? You should have an odor. La'fuke what? La'fuke, a bodim should solemn to helen. When does meat give a beautiful smell? While it's sizzling away. But once it's burnt already, and you put it on the fire, nothing comes out. So don't go ahead and roast it, out, somewhere else in the azora, and then once it's fully done, you think you can make it a lot quicker, you'll put it on the mizbeach. No, it has to give off a reyach. So lafuke evonish should tell him the helen. The light. Don't want to be no madam. Evonish should tell him the helen. Ain't sure if you did it out, off the mizbeach, and then you put it on. There's no reina chayach. L'shem, l'shem anachas ruach l'shem l'shem. Sorry, l'shem. Sorry, shemreich nechoyach l'shem hanachas ruach. What do you mean nechoyach? You're doing it for the Eibush. Should have nachas. But why? You did what the Eibush wanted. La Hashem l'shem mi shehoy amar v'hoya olam. You have to have the Eibush in mind. Amir Rav, because in the pasuk they nechoyach l'Hashem. Amir Rav chatas. Rabbi Yehuda says name of Rav chatas sheshachta l'shem olam. We learned before already. By korban chatas, korban pesach, if you have loy l'shmoi, it is possible. But if you had in mind a carbon, you know what? I'm shechting it to eat. Like chulin. It's kosher. Why is it kosher? It's even worse. Right? It's even worse. No, we already had before. We learned this about it before. It says, Lo yachal is kosher b'nei Yisrael, that what can be mechal a kodesh? Only another kodesh. If you have in mind chulin is zero compared to kachim, so it has no impact. My time that I've like kachim mechalin kachim. Only kachim can cancel out. Motiv Rabbi Yossi, look at our Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi said, if you had none of these six in mind, kosher. None of the six in mind is kosher. Why? Because we actually encourage you to have nothing in mind. Shoot tonight, bezin. So it sounds like time, but the only reason why it works is because you have nothing in mind. What happens? Believe anything wrong, even including chulin? How you believe l'shem chulin? Possible. Sounds like Rabbi Yossi. It's only because you have a vacuum there. There's nothing in mind. But you did have chulin in mind. It's a problem. Abaye said no. There's two things there. Whether it is the animal is kosher, but you don't gain anything from it, and whether the animal actually is meratza. We had before. All other kabbalas, the animal is still kosher. Proceed. It's of us, the Bailam have to bring another carbon. So the Bailam is like this. If you have nothing in mind, not only is the animal kosher, but you achieve whatever you wanted to achieve. But if you had in mind l'shem chulin, the animal we're not maratza, but it's still kosher. And when Rav says, and when Rav says to Rav that a chater shach l'shem Shayda means the animal is kosher, but not that. But you weren't yaitze your carbon still. Amar Ablaza said, "Right, what happens in this case? Chatas sheshachta l'shem chulin. You shechted a chatas for the sake of chulin. It's kosher, like we just said a minute ago. Like who just said, Ablaza said, and explained why. B'shem chulin. But if you thought it was chulin." No, but if you knew it was kosher, you say, I'm doing it for the sake of chulin. We say the animal is kosher, but you're not yaitze whatever the carbon is supposed to be. But if you, by mistake, thought that this is taka chulin, why are you standing in the base of English? I don't know, but you, for whatever reason, you thought that this was chulin, then psula, it is possible. Why should it be possible? Why should that be worse? Because there's a concept called misasik. We had this in Sheikhah Shabbos, we had it in Baba Kama, then the second Pedic, we'll have it in Christmas, in the big Machlek of Shur Blazder. Misasik is worse than a shaygig. A shaygig is you knew exactly what you're doing, but you thought that this was mutter, that was mutter. Misasik means that your hands are moving around and suddenly, you had like the Machlek actually tells you that this kabin lahagbiya tolush, and instead it was Machlek is whether according to some of the shayim, you intended to cut this cabbage, you thought it was tolush. Turned out to be that this cabbage was muchubah. And that's what misasik is. Other shayim, that's not misasik. That's like shaygig. You this avid machshavta. You wanted to cut this cabbage. You did. You just thought the mitzvah is different. What's the case of misasik? You wanted to cut this cabbage, but your hand moved over and cut a different cabbage. So b'chlal. So not only whatever you thought was published, but not only that, your ma'aseh didn't carry through. The case of Baba Kama is you were walking with a stone in your pocket. You had no idea. You had no idea that you had the stone in your pocket and it fell out and it damaged somebody, right? So whether you're chayiv or not, that's a misasik. Playing around, exactly. Playing around something. The sounds came out. So yeah, misasik means you didn't have a mind of kavanah. Here you thought it was chulin. So that's a case of misasik. So in fact, there's a question. How do you know that it's somebody misasik by kachim? So by shchita normal chulin, if you're misasik, it's good enough. But here it's possible. It says you have to shecht it for knowing that it's a carbon, but you thought that it's chulin. That's a misasik. But you thought it was chulin. So as far as kachim is concerned, that's misasik. Rashi brings down here that Rashi brings the chulin, which we'll learn. Rashi brings in that this asik is the case that you wanted to throw a knife on the wall, and instead it just went flying and it shechted an animal while it was going. So that's a case of ma'aseh, misasik in ma'aseh. Here we're talking about misasik in machshava, right? So you thought it was kachim. You thought it was chulin. Turned out to be it was kachim. But anyway, so that's the classical case of misasik. So he answered it back. Yeah, it's possible. Amalei Zubi Adenihi. Everyone knows this misasik is not good enough for kachim. My question is la'akiv menai. How do you know that if Yitaka did it, not only chatchil is no good, even the Evid we say nothing happened, it's so no good. Amalei, because it says in pasuk l'tzoin chem tizbechu, that when you shechte the zevach shlamim, it has to be l'tzoin chem. Now what? So this is a higher case of misasik. The chiddush of the kachim of misasik is that the ma'aseh might have been 100%, and you wanted to shech, and everything you wanted to do, you did. The kavanah here. In all the other cases of misasik, generally is usually the chsaron in the ma'aseh itself as well. You thought, even in the case where you ended up cutting the same cabbage, but you thought that this cabbage was detached. That's a different matias, not just a legal thing. Like over here, legally kachim, it's not tangible things. So that's the step forward chiddush here by kachim that even though in the ma'aseh everything you wanted to do you did, so it's not just a shaygig here. L'chayr will be just a shaygig. You thought that it was this. No, this is called misasik. As far as kabbalah is concerned, has to be the tzon chem. That machshava plays a big part. Pigel teaches us that machshava plays a big part. And sorry, yeah.
That's the topic that we had on the previous page, but the solutions,
sorry? What? Did I miss out something?
No.
Yeah.
Leftovers from the bonus, like the blood, the ashes, and that, which goes down the Nahal Kidron. So the farmers, I can't remember what's the din. Do they have to buy it from the Mikdash?
We had this in the second page of Psachim. We'll learn later as well. But we had the second page of Psachim. Do we say the blood there from Kachin that went down there?
But it makes me fertilizer.
Yes, so we said with the Rabbanon you have to, but whether they have to pay for it or not, whether with the
So
Rabbanon.
I'm saying it's shaykh to what we had on the first Omud.
Yeah, about the blood. But there's more than just blood. There's pieces as well.
Yeah,
There's pieces of fats and everything on in.
I can't remember what's the deal.
Have a good day.